podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io. Welcome you to another episode of Startuprad.io, the authority on German, Swiss and Austrian startups. Today I do have Chris with me, and no, it's not my co-founder, it's Chris Holscher. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Hey Joe, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Totally my pleasure. Today we will be talking about analyst relations. But before we get into that, a little message from our partner. Did you know that on average, a blog post gets you way more traffic than a social media post? We have a special deal with moderniqs.com where Startuprad.io listeners can create 2 free SEO optimized blog posts per month for eternity. In less than a minute. You'll get 2 free posts for your blog each month only when you use the link in the show notes. This is exclusive for our audience, and just click on the link in the show notes and use this to subscribe. If you go back and forth, you won't get the 2 pieces. Sorry, that done. Chris, we're talking about here analyst relations, but I have a financial services background, and what I had in my mind when you started approaching me with analyst relations was some investment analyst, but that's not the case. We are talking about analyst relations in big companies like Gartner or Forrester. But before we get into that, how did you get this interesting and very unique job?
Well, I'll try to cut the long story short. So I've always played at the intersection between innovation management, marketing, product development. And roughly 15, 20 years ago, I was with a large company called BT Global Services. I was a product manager there and a product marketing manager later. And I was approached to run a Gartner Magic Quadrant submission. I had no idea what that was. In short, Gartner is the largest analyst firm in the world, and their Magic Quadrant is their flagship product that is rating vendors in that specific market. So I was asked to run that submission for the entire company. So I did, and we did extremely well. We went from a niche vendor to a leader in that Magic Quadrant. So they asked me again and again and again in the following years, and we did very well. It was a thing that immediately clicked with me. And at some point, I made the switch to run their entire analyst relations program for various parts of their portfolio. That was the compute portfolio, but also their innovation portfolio. And one thing that I've heard over and over again from analysts was that they love to speak to the real innovators in the market, which is very often startups. But they cannot really afford spending all that much time with startups because young companies very often have no conception of analyst relations. And if they know about the term at all, they often have misconceptions about it, which makes it not time well spent for an analyst to reach out to startups, sadly. So at some point, I decided to make the switch, step out of that mega player, and focus my knowledge and my understanding entirely to the benefit of startups and bring that understanding into the ecosystem that needs it really the most. And that is how I got into analyst relations for startups.
Before we get into how you could do that, can you tell us a little bit of reasoning, the benefits, why startups should do that? From our conversation before, what I understood is it's especially important for startups in the B2B space because a lot of the people who make purchase decisions cover themselves, cover the jobs. When they can say, look, it's in this Forrester, it's in this Gartner analyzes, it's in the Magic Quadrant, whatever. So basically they have external validation of their decision. Is that one of the big points?
That is absolutely true. Yes. Well, maybe very quick introduction what analysts actually are. So analysts, there are roughly 10,000 analysts in the world. Scattered around 700 different firms, of which Gartner is by far the largest one. Then there's IDC and Forrester as the big 3. Then there's a medium section, also generalists, like Omdia or GigaOm or RedMonk or so, that have basically a broad spectrum of areas that they cover, but they're medium-sized firms. And then there are a whole lot of specialists. Like in Germany, we have Coppinger Cole, who are security specialists and identity specialists, who are very good at what they do. Or IoT Analytics, also a German company, very good at what they do, obviously. Internet of Things related topics. But they're small. They're maybe like 15, 20, or 100 people. So very specialized. So also important to understand why analyst relations is important. It's important to understand what they're used for. And the first thing is, as you mentioned, buyers are using analysts to protect them kind of from overly confident marketing. So you can win new customers through analysts. And that is because in B2B tech, 3 in 4 CIOs say that analyst publications and their direct guidance on their purchasing challenges are analysts, are the number one impact in their shortlisting and buying decisions. And that is, just to give you a dimension, a single analyst has 750 to 2,000 interactions with buyers and potential partners of yours per year. That is a single person. And you cannot just leave that impact to your competition. Then there is a second reason. So, of course, through all those interactions that an analyst has with a buyer, they get really deep understanding of the demand and of their motivations, of their architectures, frankly, also of their entire decision-making context. So they understand extremely deeply and extremely at a great breadth and depth. They understand the market. So vendors can use that on an aggregate basis to inform their portfolio decisions, their roadmap decisions, their go-to-market, their messaging, what resonates, what kind of language works with buyers and what not, at what point in time and for what reasons and all that. So you can make better informed decisions much quicker. And we both know, and our audience probably as well, that especially with startups, it's all about making bolder decisions faster than your rivals. So that is what analysts are absolutely essential doing, especially in the B2B tech world where everything is so fast paced and it's very unforgiving. And then, of course, you can get quite a marketing boost out of analysts once you get mentioned in one of their reports. And that doesn't have to be the Magic Quadrant. In fact, the MQ is not really designed for a startup. It can be a million other types of reports, like investor reports or innovation reports, technology reports, market reports, and so on. There's a plethora. Emerging Tech Radar is a thing, or Gartner's Hype Cycle report. If you get mentioned in there as one of a handful of example vendors for a specific technology, you can use that as third-party validation of your relevance and your quality, really, as a vendor to people who may consider buying your thing, or to have third-party validation for your thought leadership paper and things like this. So this can be very, very impactful. And last not least, also investors, of course, do inquire with analysts to qualify innovation, to qualify trends and demand. And they want to see AR savvy startups because it tells them that you are of a certain maturity in your management and you understand this super important part of the playing field. And of course that entirely changes their risk calculation and thereby impacts your term sheet if you are on the radars of the most influential analysts. So one thing that the hyper successful startups of the last years, companies like Core AI, for example, they have been on the radar of analysts very, very early on. They've been a cool vendor with Gartner, 7 years ago or something. And just 2 years later, they made it into one of their flagship reports. And now they're a multi-billion-dollar company because of the enormous impact of industry analysts. And that's kind of the reason why you want to be in that game.
Sounds pretty much like a marketing boost or a marketing shortcut, a marketing hack to be in there, even though it's not as easy. Do step X, then do step Y. It's a little bit more complicated, but in general, you have a few steps you can do to approach an analyst. How would you prepare as a startup to get there? We may tell the audience that we are right now looking a little bit at a theoretical approach to do an analyst briefing to one of those big analysts and tell him or her what is so special about your product, what's so special about your company, why he should include you.
Yes. Okay. Let me say one thing just before I answer your question, to handle the assumption that analyst relations is predominantly a marketing thing. Marketing is probably the most visible part of it. But I've done a lot of research myself together with the University of Edinburgh Business School, and we may get to that later, that the marketing section of analyst relations, the value that you're getting, is only a fraction of the actual business value that you're getting. It's the most visible bit, but it's not the most strategic bit in many cases. So the most strategic bit is actually sharpening your product market fit, sharpening your go-to-market, accelerating your roadmap, making the right decisions, taking risk out of your journey, attracting better investment and all that. So that's all non-marketing bits of value, or even attracting and keeping the best talent in the world, as you can demonstrate in your hiring conversations, that you are working with the best informed brains in the market, and that they maybe even have access to all that research and all that data and insight. That can really set you apart from others, and it helps you attract and keep the best talent in the world. So it has a plethora of different values, and a good analyst relations specialist can help you get hold of all that value far beyond just the marketing bits of it. Although I agree the marketing bit is, of course, the most visible one. I mean, by nature, of course. Now, to answer your question, so what should you do as a step? Step one is you should make the strategic decision, first of all, to qualify, is this for me or not? So analyst relations is not for everyone. Analyst relations is only relevant for real innovators. And innovator does not necessarily need to be just technology innovation. You can be an absolute Me Too product, but you can be hyper innovative on the way how you deliver it, or on your pricing, or on your service, or on your, you bring it to a new region in the world where it's not been available so far. So that can be an innovator as well. So, but understand, just doing the same as everybody else in the same way as everybody else, analyst relations will not be for you. And that is not to dismiss, that kind of business. It can be a very profitable business. It's just not of relevance for analysts. So you need to find out, are there analysts covering my thing? And is what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it relevant enough for analysts to actually play with me? And I can help, or people like me can help startups qualify this very quickly, really. Now, step two would be to make the conscious decision to start analyst relations as early and as strategically as you can afford if you're in B2B tech, because it is of enormous impact to the success of companies in that field.
In terms of startup maturity, when you do have a product market fit around Series A, when you're already looking at around €1 million annual recurring revenue, that would be the point when you would start it?
No, that is what most VCs tend to where they have an action item of analyst relations on their checklist. But in order to be able to tick that off, you need to engage much sooner, because especially in the United States, for example, doing analyst relations is a standard much earlier in the process. And if you ask analysts, and I've done that with the research that I've been doing, they are actually interested in working with startups much earlier, even while you define your minimal viable product, even when you're still in beta phase, even way before you have your first reference customers or so. So startups always assume they need to have a certain revenue, or they need to have reference customers, or they need to have a certain maturity. And analysts typically say, no. We want to hear from you before your pilot customers have started to mess with your ideas, because we want to understand your original thinking. because we are analysts. We're not, we're not influencers. We don't have an influencer proposition where you pay us money and then we say nice things about you. We are here to analyze, to understand, and to aggregate thinking. So they want to speak with you much, much sooner, and they're open to being reached out to very, very early, even in your concept phase. And you need that early engagement to build up, to use the time to build credibility, to build their confidence in your idea, in your delivery, in your completeness of vision, in your ability to execute, so that they can actually at some point be sure that when they recommend you to inquiring buyers, or inquiring partners or investors, that they are not recommending bullshit. So you need a certain time to build that confidence, and you should start that as early as possible. The cool thing is, doing briefings with analysts is always free. So there's no reason, to say you couldn't afford it, because you can start doing briefings very, very early on. Without spending $1 or €1 on it, or even a cent. Although briefings are typically a one-way street where your information goes to the analyst, if you do them well, you can even get some feedback for what you're telling them about, and that can be enormously valuable. One client of mine has received recommendations to just alter their proposition slightly and target specific personas at certain types of companies. And now they're getting literally hundreds of project requests from Amazon Web Services. So it's done, and it's a qualitative support that you're getting, and it is not always the same. It has a million different shapes, but it can be life-changing. So you should start very early and be very clear about how you do it. Now, once you've done that decision, the actual first step would be to identify the right analysts to speak to, because they're all different. As I said, there are 10,000 different analysts in the world, industry analysts in the world. Some are focusing on technologies, others are focusing on certain market segments, others are focusing on functions like marketing or finance or what have you. And most of them have a mix of all of this. And all of them have their different backgrounds and histories and research agendas. So you need to really figure out who's best positioned to be interested in what I do, and best positioned in terms of the companies that inquire with that analyst to be relevant for me. So that is step number one. Of course, that is quite difficult, and it's quite hard for someone who is not a professional in analyst relations to figure out that fit. And honestly, I wouldn't really know how to do that if I weren't in that space. So I would recommend go get yourself someone into your team who has an analyst relations background who can help you do that, or hire an external specialist to help you through that phase. And that doesn't take forever. It takes a few weeks or a couple of months, depending on how far you want to go. But it's time and money very well spent.
This person also should help you to actually prepare and do the rebriefing. If you threw together a PowerPoint in the last minute, just mixed a few decks and don't really know what's on each slide, it's very likely you won't get a second briefing with this analyst.
That is very, very true. Don't make the mistake of just repurposing your marketing slides or your sales pitch or your investor pitch. This is the wrong information delivered in the wrong way, and it's typically at the wrong depth and not in the language that an analyst would require. So go get help. Structuring your briefing, focusing your briefing, and also you need to be very, very precise in the language that you're using. So a vision is not the same thing as a mission. A purpose is not the same thing as a vision. A strategy is not a long-term plan. A plan and a strategy are two very different things in nature. So analysts are very because they are all about telling things apart. So they need to understand very precisely what you're about and what you're not about. So you need to use very accurate language. And if you're getting that right, it sets you apart from, 98% of your rivals already. And by the way, it's also very helpful to understand your own business in that very accurate language and make these decisions. So design a winning analyst introductory briefing. And to give you an idea, the structure that I've developed for myself is around 10 slides or so, 10 content slides. You typically get 30 minutes. Of those 30 minutes, you want to reserve at least 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. That gives you a maximum of 20 or so minutes you can actually present. And in those 20 minutes, you need to thoroughly explain your business workings. And that takes some experience. So I would recommend get yourself an analyst relations specialist who can help you design that. Once you've gotten the feedback from the analyst, ideally a feedback not like "thank you very much, don't call us, we call you." that would mean that would mean you haven't made the cut. But if you get a feedback like "that was very interesting, I would love to stay in touch. I would love to get a follow-up on this particular aspect. I would love to speak to one of your pilot customers or one of your, partners, or could we do an extra session on this particular aspect?" That tells you the analyst has made the decision to let you into their world of thinking. So that means you are in fact relevant to their end customers who are inquiring about the thing that you're offering. So that tells you it's a very thorough, a very reliable way of proving product market fit, because that analyst is so in-depth connected to your target audience and to the wider market in all sorts of ways, because they do nothing else every day. So that means you're in. So you're now on the radar of that analyst. The next challenge is to get from the radar onto the map, to stay in that picture. So you want the analyst to actually put you into one of their reports, into their publications of whichever shape or form, and that you will need to work on. The big dimensions are your completeness of vision and your ability to execute, and you need to demonstrate both over time through repeated briefings and through repeated interactions with that analyst, and proving to the analyst that you're working along your roadmap and you're following up on your promises, and you slowly, gradually build their confidence in your product, in your ability to deliver, in your strategy, in your ability to follow through and do the things that to execute the things that are in your strategy, and to build that confidence that at some point he or she is confident to recommend you, not just in direct conversations to people inquiring about the type of product that you bring to market, but also to put you into their innovation reports or their bigger thinking about market trends and predictions and things like that. So that would be the next phase, which then consists of 100 different actions that you will need to take and build this confidence.
But I have to admit, with now around 20 plus minutes in recording, I do believe we have made already a pretty big moment for many founders out there. Just to have in mind that not magically some of those companies will have you appear in the report, but it's actually pretty tough work to get in there. You likely need a specialist. You likely need quite some time in order to get this done. It does cost some money. Do you have a pretty rough idea what happened to a few of your clients, what they are doing? I know it's not a one-on-one relation, very likely.
I can give you a couple of examples. So most impressively, maybe when I worked with a company in the communication space, doing analyst relations right, so to say, to cut it short, suddenly led to 5 times more leads that they generated. At the same time, with the leads that followed through, they had a much better win rate, and the deals that they were able to win suddenly went from pretty operational types of deals to far more strategic levels of conversations and far more strategic deals that they were able to close. So the individual value of the individual deal was much bigger, and which led to I hope I don't get this wrong. So they had 5 times the leads and 4 times the revenue that they generated compared to previously. Now that is, of course, not something that I can promise for everyone. That was this company being particularly successful with how we were able to make analyst relations work for them in the challenges that they had. So I'll give you another example. We had I was working with a transformation consultancy, and they were able, in this very difficult market environment, they were able, through their analyst relations work, attract much more talent that they were able to attract previously, just because they were able to offer a highly valuable proposition to the people that would be working for them through their access to top-notch industry analysts' knowledge and data and all that. And that was very attractive to people who would otherwise maybe have been working for Accenture or for McKinsey or someone, which also would have had analyst relations contracts, but not in the same way executed as this small firm was able to give them direct access into those bits of research, because they understood how to handle it in a productive way. I can give you a third example, and that was a company that I've worked with in the IoT space. They actually became a cool vendor, highlighted by Gartner in one of their reports. And at the time, they didn't really know what to do with it. So they just put it on their website, and nothing really more happened. A year later, one of their competitors from the United States, pretty much offering the same thing, was also highlighted as a cool vendor in the Gartner report. And they knew what to do with analyst relations. So they actively worked with that visibility and with the insight that they could gain from it through the analysts. And just 2 years later, when the first company had hired me because they had difficulties in getting investor money and stuff, and we did briefings and we did inquiries and things, and I got them into a Gartner investor report as one of just 5 other example vendors in that particular field, which highlighted them to the market and got them, a few months later, got them a Series A investment at a certain valuation. Now, through that report, we were able to spot that other vendor in the US who appeared 1 year later, but now was mentioned in that same investor report. And they had already surpassed the German company that I was working now with, surpassed them because they engaged in analyst relations earlier in their maturity cycle. They were now at a valuation that was 5 times as large as the German company, just because they started their analyst relations journey earlier, knew what to do, and played it more thoroughly, more strategically. So the German company was in the market a year earlier, was highlighted earlier, didn't know what to do with it, started analyst relations later, and got outplayed by 5 times the valuation within just a few years. So it's very different for each company, and it depends very much on your market situation, on your product, on your priorities that you have. But it can have an absolutely substantial impact on everything that you do.
I see. And that is actually not the only piece of content we're doing together, because you are not only advising startups how to get into those reports, but you're also building knowledge. You're doing surveys.
Yes. When I made the decision to switch from the dark side, the large mega players, to the bright side, to the startups, I quickly found out that there is very little research on the matter. I had done early research myself, where I just found out that European startups were mentioned a lot less in high-profile analyst publications compared to United States headquartered vendors. So comparison, 5 US companies versus one European company, that was quite stark. And that led me into looking, so how is this with startups? And there was very little research. So I approached the University of Edinburgh Business School, and Professor Neil Pollock there, who leads their innovation research, was quickly on board to say, yes, let's examine this. And we set up what we called the State of Startups with Industry Analysts research. And we immediately set it up as a research program that would go forever. So we do this every 2 years. We examine the situation from 3 different angles. So startups, of course, we ask startups, how do you work with analysts? Why? And what are the outcomes? We asked investors, so venture capital firms, but also the accelerator ecosystem. So what is your engagement with startups and industry analysts? And what are your experiences? What are the outcomes that you see? And we also asked the industry analysts themselves in how do you work with startups from your end? And what are you recommending? What is working? What is not working? And what are the outcomes? So we approach it from all 3 angles to get a 360 degree of the matter. And we didn't only ask startups and VCs and so who already knew about analyst relations. We specifically also asked those players who had no conception at all about analyst relations. So we really get the 360 degrees of insight. And we had a couple of phenomenal findings there. So first of all, European startups have no idea of the type of value that they get. 73% of them think that analysts' exposure to buyers is rather low, where in reality, 79% of analysts speak to startups specifically to identify innovators that they can recommend to inquiring buyers. And I told you earlier that a single analyst has 1,000 to 2,000 buyer interactions every year. So that's huge. So 73% of startups think that the ability to get exposures to buyers is low, but almost 8 in 10 analysts speak to startups specifically to identify innovators that they can recommend to inquiring buyers. So massive mismatch tells you knowing about this can get you a leap ahead of a huge portion of your rivals. Mm-hmm. Second finding was that 2/3 of startups think they must have broad availability before industry analysts are even open to these conversations, as we discussed earlier. But the majority of analysts want to speak to you at beta or even minimal viable product stage. So enormous shift there as well. So you can start much earlier. The interesting thing about that is that we found that professional analyst relations, handling of analyst relations, can pull forward this qualified visibility through their market reports or through direct recommendations to buyers by as much as 4 years. So the average, the mean age of startups being mentioned in reports was around 7 years in business. And if you do analyst relations professionally and do it well, those companies were able to pull that forward by as much as 4 years. So they got mentioned in the first 3 years in business. And that is, as you know, in startup world, that is literally a lifetime for many startups, sadly. So that's quite a pull effect. Now, then we also, another example of the research findings was that we asked analysts, so what type of analyst relations handling, what type of organization makes analyst relations most effective in your work with startups. So if you work through a marketing agency, or if you have analyst relations handled through your venture capital firm, or, however, or through your strategy department or through your marketing department or what. And the finding there was, it's of course best handled through AR specialists. And I'm not just saying this because I am a specialist, but because the difference was so stark. Because analyst relations specialists were rated 50 points better than if it was handled through a marketing agency or PR agency or through your VC. In fact, PR agencies and VCs had a net negative rating through the eyes of the actual industry analysts who were supposed to be, addressed by these briefings. And they had a net negative rating in terms of effectiveness. So understanding that, again, gets you a leap forward in comparison for competitors who may handle it intuitively and differently.
I also have in the back of my mind that you will share in the next episode a few more of your learnings there. Plus, there is or there will be soon another survey going on.
Yes, absolutely. So as I said, we're doing this on a biannual basis, and the results that I just shared were from the 2022 survey, and we've just launched a couple of weeks ago the 24 version of the same research. We're not asking the exact same questions again because we are adding puzzle piece by puzzle piece to our, comprehensive understanding of the matter. So this year it'll be all about how startups use analyst relations throughout the organizations, different use cases, which analyst firms are most used by startups and which are best rated as well. And then when in your maturity cycle do you best do what? When do you start briefings? When you start inquiries? When you start to do document reviews? When do you start to participate in events and all those kinds of things? So when in your journey should you do what? So a couple of really interesting puzzle pieces to our holistic understanding of the matter. And we can, by the way, we should put links in the show notes for people to contribute, because again, it does not matter whether you have or have no understanding of analyst relations, because again, we want to collect the entire understanding from all angles, and it only takes like 15 minutes.
Sounds pretty good. Everybody who'd like to learn more, you can go down here in the show notes. There's a link to your LinkedIn profile as well as a link to the survey that you'll hopefully share with me after this recording. Definitely. Great. Chris, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the time. Thanks for all your listeners tuning in.
Looking forward to have you back. Bye-bye.
Speak soon. Bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.